Hi, thank you for watching Digging to China. I'm Dong Shang. As COVID-19 spread across China last year, some commentators dubbed it as China Chernobyl moments, which would undermine the legitimacy and rule of CCP. It was not, but a more likely candidate is debt crisis harbingered by Evergrande. As China's second biggest property developer and the most indebted developer in the world, Evergrande is out of cash and unable to meet interest payments due to both domestic and foreign bondholders. Evergrande owns more than 1,300 projects in more than 280 cities across China. After the debt crisis emerged, Beijing has largely refrained from stepping in. The goal was to make an example of the debt-ridden business model and the capitalist excesses to banks and others. It has been reported that some deal has been done to meet an interested payment to domestic bondholders only. Most of the Evergrande liabilities are pre-sale deposited by about 1.5 million households. Company employees and investors bought Evergrande financial products that were issued to help fund itself. Some sort of state bailout is inevitable. Otherwise, the financial contagion, economic and social instability consequences of a massive default will not look good for Xi Jinping. 20th CCP Congress will happen in November next year. Unhappy citizens is the last thing CCP wants to see. However, China will go through a period of financial distress, which will squeeze growth hard. According to Goldman Sachs' estimate, China's property market was worth $52 trillion in 2019, 4 times of China's GDP. It has been China's economic engine for years. The motto was borrow, build, and they will come. As a result, housing prices skyrocketed. Xi Jinping and other leaders have warned that the property is for living in, not for speculation. In order to curb the runaway housing price, central government has toughened the mortgages and second home ownership rules. Last year, Beijing introduced 3 red lines restrictions to limit the growth in both debt and the supply of new homes. About a fifth of China's real estate units are empty. This year, Beijing began to crack down on private companies and it has extended to housing. All of a sudden, investing in housing is no longer low IQ, high return. Rather, it became very risky. A recently revived slogan called Common Prosperity, designed to address the country's staggering wealth inequality, has called for greater taxation of high incomes and capital, including a long-discussed nationwide property tax. Declining population, especially the shrinking of working-age population, paints a gloomy picture in the long run. Local government's debt is a much bigger crisis than Evergrande. Evergrande's debt seems like a small potato compared to the $8.2 trillion worth of local government outstanding debt. And that figure is as of the end of 2020. Now it is certainly higher, perhaps much higher. How come China's local governments have accumulated that much debt? Look no further than 2008. Even before the Lehman Brothers crisis and the subsequent financial market meltdown, Communist Party leadership encouraged municipal borrowing binges. In order to get attention in Beijing and rose to national prominence, local officials needed to produce above-average GDP growth rate. The simplest way to boost GDP was to construct buildings. A few dozen local provincial leaders engaged in an infrastructure arms race. Metropolis raced to build skyscrapers, 6-lane highways, international airports and hotels, white elephant stadiums, shopping districts, and amusement parks. After the financial crisis in 2008, Beijing doubled down. Central government unleashed a record credit boom in the midst of the global financial crisis. Debt-fueled construction created a burst of jobs and wealth. and not just in the construction industry, but in the production of steel, cement, and other supplies, and in the sales of luxury items to the newly wealthy. And it looked good in economic data, at least initially, since the building of houses and other structures gets counted as GDP growth, even if they all don't get sold. In China, unfinished buildings that have stayed empty for years and a blight landscape are now commonplace. Evergrande is merely symptomatic of a much bigger problem. China's sprawling real estate sector, which contributes as much as 30% of the country's gross domestic product, has been the prime driver of its economic growth, but now may become the prime drag on that growth. Reluctant to run up the central government's debt, Beijing let the local authorities set up units to fund all manner of spending. In any of the other largest economies in the world, the kind of debt and overcapacity accumulation would have long since created a banking crisis, as it did in Japan in 1998 and the United States in 2008. But China is different in one key respect. It owns or controls all of the major components of its economy. If it chooses to allow banks to continue to lend to an already over-leveraged company, then it can do just that. Therefore, it can juggle debt, overcapacity, and other elements of economic crisis far longer than Japan or the United States. All real estate booms go bust, and China's turn may have come. Yet the country has never experienced a meaningful decline in property prices, which have risen by almost 50% since 2015 alone, according to Bank of International Settlements data. Majority of Chinese people's wealth are tied to housing. Hundreds of millions of middle-class Chinese see property as a key family asset and a status symbol. If housing price declines, it will undermine consumption and investment. They will have negative implications for banks, and bad loan increases and the value of collateral in loan agreements declines. Since local governments depend heavily on land sales to fund their spending, they will become even more financially stressed and be less able to meet obligations. Property sales and prices have weakened in recent months while Evergrande stole headlines. Some local governments have imposed price floor controls to stop the cost of homes nosediving. If potential home buyers are spooked and hold on to their cash, sales will be driven down further. To rescue or not to rescue? This is the Hamlet question for CCP. Thank you for watching. Please leave a comment and subscribe to my channel. Just click the subscribe button right here. I'll see you again shortly.